Snow fell in thick curtains beyond the razor wire perimeter, muffling the world in white silence. Inside Forward Operating Base Sentinel, the communication hub stood as the last occupied building, its windows glowing amber against the Christmas Eve darkness. Most personnel had rotated out days earlier, leaving skeleton crews to maintain essential operations through the holiday. The base felt hollow without its usual complement of troops. Hallways that normally echoed with boots and conversation now carried only the wind's whistle through gaps in the prefabricated walls. The dining facility had closed after serving lunch, its industrial kitchen dark and cold. Even the motor pool sat silent, vehicles winterized and waiting for crews that wouldn't return until January. Claire Hartman sat alone in the dimly lit communications center, her posture relaxed but alert. At 34, she'd learned to make peace with solitude. The red standby lights of the radio equipment blinked their steady rhythm, keeping time with the wind outside. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she didn't mind. Night shifts on holidays were predictable, quiet, uneventful, perfect for someone who preferred being forgotten. Most people at Sentinel knew her simply as the overnight comms operator who rarely spoke unless necessary. Her personnel file listed her previous role as intelligence support, vague enough to discourage questions. She preferred it that way. The fewer people who remembered Captain Claire Hartman, call sign Specter, the better she slept at night. Outside, the Christmas decorations someone had hung in the operations tent swayed in the wind. Paper snowflakes and a string of battery-powered lights, childish and hopeful. Claire had watched a young specialist string them up 3 days ago, humming carols under his breath. He'd been shipped home yesterday with the rest of 3rd Battalion. Now it was just her, a handful of security personnel, and the howling wind. The clock read 22:47 when the radio crackled. Not the usual static, but a sharp burst that made Claire's hand freeze halfway to her coffee mug. Her body recognized the sound before her mind processed it, the distinct signature of a combat net frequency breaking through emergency encryption. Any station. Any station. This is Falcon 7-2 declaring code black. We are code black. Repeat, code black. Claire's chest tightened. Code black meant captured personnel. The voice on the other end was strained, forced calm masking panic. She pulled on her headset, fingers moving through protocols she'd retired 3 years ago. Falcon 7-2, this is Sentinel Base. Copy your code black. Send location and situation. The response came through, broken by interference and the unmistakable percussion of small arms fire. Sentinel, we're static. 5 clicks north of checkpoint Delta. SEAL team, 6 operators. We got ambushed during reconnaissance. 3 wounded, all of us zip-tied in some kind of lacuses. The voice dropped to an urgent whisper. They're bringing in reinforcements. I count at least 50 fighters moving in. They're arguing about when to execute us. Please advise, please. Claire's breath caught. That voice, she knew that voice. Not the name, but the cadence, the particular way he clipped his consonants under stress. 4 years ago, she'd provided overwatch for a SEAL team during a high-value target extraction. One of them had called her an angel when her shot had dropped a hostile 20 seconds before detonation. She'd never seen their faces, never learned their names. But she remembered voices. Claire's hands moved across the console, pulling up satellite feeds and operational maps, while her other hand keyed the base-wide alert. Lieutenant Morris, the ranking officer on duty, arrived within 2 minutes, still buttoning his jacket. "What have we got?" he asked, leaning over her shoulder to study the displays. SEAL team captured 5 clicks north of Delta. They're claiming 50-plus hostiles converging on their position. Claire's voice remained steady, professional. They're requesting immediate extraction or close air support. Morris frowned at the thermal imaging feed. "I'm not seeing any large concentrations of heat signatures in that sector. Our last UAV passed 2 hours ago showed the area was clear. The thermal's being masked," Claire said, highlighting irregular patterns in the snow cover. "See these depressions? They're using the terrain, staying low in the ravines." And here she zoomed in on a section of forest. The tree canopy is blocking direct overhead observation. Morris studied the images, doubt clear in his expression. "That's a lot of assumptions based on some shadows in the snow. Command pulled most assets south for the holiday. I can't authorize a full rescue operation on Christmas Eve without concrete intelligence." "Sir, I can analyze the audio patterns from their transmission. Give me 5 minutes." Claire didn't wait for approval. She isolated the background noise from Falcon 7-2's last transmission, filtering out the voice to expose the ambient sounds. Diesel engines idling, multiple voices speaking in overlapping patterns, the distinct metallic click of weapon safeties being disengaged. She ran the audio through analysis software, counting distinct engine signatures and vocal patterns. Minimum 43 individual voices, she reported. At least 8 vehicles. Radio chatter in the background suggests coordinated movement. They're not bandits, sir. This is an organized force. Morris pulled out his phone to call the operations center at the main base 40 miles south. While he argued with whoever answered, Claire continued analyzing. She pulled up historical intelligence reports for the northern sector, cross-referencing known militant movements with weather patterns. Everything pointed to one conclusion. This wasn't random. The enemy had been waiting for exactly this moment. Skeleton crew on base, air support grounded by weather, command structure fragmented by holiday rotations. The radio crackled again. Sentinel, Falcon 7-2, situation critical. They're preparing execution posts. I can see. The transmission cut off with a sharp burst of interference, then returned. They're arguing about timing. Some want to wait for daylight to film it. We might have until dawn. Please, you have to. Morris ended his call, frustration etched across his face. Command says the closest QRF is 3 hours out, and they won't move until we have visual confirmation of hostile forces. The weather has every air asset grounded. I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can authorize right now. Claire felt the familiar weight settle in her chest, the same suffocating pressure she'd carried since leaving active operations. The feeling of watching people die because procedure demanded certainty before action. She'd quit for exactly this reason the moment when protocol and reality diverged, and good soldiers paid the price. Sir, Claire said quietly, what if I told you I could verify the threat? Morris turned. How? We don't have the assets for. I'll go. Personal reconnaissance. If the threat is real, I'll confirm and mark targets for the QRF when they arrive. You're a comms operator, Morris said flatly. I can't send you into a potential combat zone. A young specialist named Rodriguez had entered during their conversation. He'd been listening from the doorway, and now he spoke up. Lieutenant, that's not entirely accurate. Morris glanced at him. What? Rodriguez looked at Claire with something between awe and disbelief. Sir, I recognized her analysis technique. The way she isolated those audio signatures, that's advanced ISR protocol. I looked up her service number while you were on the phone. He pulled out his phone, showing a military database entry. Captain Claire Hartman, former Joint Special Operations Command, designated marksman and intelligence specialist. 5 years, operational deployment across 3 theaters. Multiple classified operations. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor device. Call sign. He paused, swallowing. Call sign Specter. The database entry showed a record that read like fiction. Claire had operated in some of the most dangerous environments the military faced. Her skills weren't just shooting, she'd been part of an elite cadre that combined precision engagement with intelligence gathering, often working alone behind enemy lines for days at a time. The kind of operator that command called when conventional solutions failed. The room went silent, except for the hum of electronics. Morris stared at Claire, reassessing everything he thought he knew about the quiet woman who'd been filing radio logs for the past 6 months. The Specter? Morris asked. The one from Kandahar? The legend about the shooter who extracted a downed pilot by herself. Claire's jaw tightened. She hated the stories, the way they grew with each retelling. It wasn't by myself, and it wasn't extraction, it was suppression until actual rescue arrived. Your record shows 247 confirmed targets over 5 years, Rodriguez continued, unable to stop himself. Multiple commendations for precision fire under extreme conditions. You trained half the sniper instructors currently. That's enough, Claire interrupted. What matters is I have the skills to confirm the threat and provide targeting data. 5 clicks in this weather is a 3-hour movement. I can be in position before they execute those SEALs. Morris processed this information. Military pragmatism warring with caution. You've been out of action for 3 years. You really think you can? I never stopped training, Claire said. I just stopped deploying. She stood, moving to a secure locker in the corner of the room. The combination lock yielded to her fingers, revealing gear she'd hoped never to use again. Her M2010 rifle, meticulously maintained, custom modifications still intact, rangefinder, thermal optic. The weight of it all felt like putting on an old skin she'd tried to shed. Morris made his decision. Okay, but this is reconnaissance only. You observe, report, and mark targets. The QRF does the actual intervention. Clear? Crystal? Claire lied. They both knew that if those SEALs were about to be executed, reconnaissance would become intervention. Neither of them said it aloud. The snowmobile's engine cut through the night as Claire navigated by GPS and instinct. She'd switched to cross-country skis for the final 2 kilometers, silent approach more important than speed. The cold bit through her layers, but she barely noticed. Her mind had shifted into the focused state she remembered too well. Everything narrowed to mission parameters, environmental factors, threat assessment. Movement through winter terrain required different skills than desert or jungle operations. Snow revealed tracks, but also absorbed sound. Cold affected equipment reliability and human performance. Claire's breath formed clouds that could give away position, so she breathed through a scarf that trapped condensation. Her weapon needed special attention in these temperatures. Lubricants could freeze, metal could contract, optical sights could fog. The terrain matched her memory of the area. Low hills, covered in pine forest, cut through by steep ravines that channeled wind and sound in unpredictable ways. Perfect for ambush, perfect for concealment. She found a position on a ridge, overlooking the suspected location, using a fallen tree for cover while she assembled her observation post. Through her thermal optic, the scene emerged like a nightmare. The SEAL team was exactly where Falcon 7-2 had reported, bound and guarded in a small clearing. But the real concern was what surrounded them. Claire began counting heat signatures, methodically marking each one on her tablet. 43, 47, 51, 52. Sentinel base. Specter. I have eyes on target area, confirming 5-2 hostile combatants in defensive positions around 6 friendly captives. They've established a perimeter with interlocking fields of fire. This is organized, well-equipped opposition. Morris's voice came through her earpiece. Copy that, Specter. QRF is wheels up in 90 minutes. Maintain position and provide targeting data. 90 minutes. Claire watched as several hostiles dragged wooden posts into the clearing, planting them in the snow. Execution posts. She zoomed in on the SEAL team's faces, searching for the one whose voice she recognized. The second operator from the left, even bound and bleeding, his expression showed the controlled fear of someone trained to survive. That was him. Her rangefinder gave her the numbers. 680 meters to the clearing. Wind steady at 7 knots from the northwest. Temperature -12 Celsius. Humidity 72%. The calculations flowed automatically. Muscle memory from thousands of hours of training. She could make the shots. The question was whether she should. A commander among the hostile forces emerged from a vehicle, shouting orders. The activity in the clearing intensified. They were preparing something, moving with purpose. Claire switched to her camera, recording everything for intelligence. Then she heard it, the distinctive click of weapons being readied, multiple simultaneous sounds that told her the wait was over. They weren't waiting for dawn. They were doing this now. Sentinel, Specter. Hostiles are preparing immediate execution. I need authorization for defensive action. Static, then Morris's voice. Strained. Negative, Specter. QRF is still 40 minutes out. You're authorized to observe and mark targets only. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Claire watched as they forced the SEALs to their knees in front of the posts. 3 hostiles with cameras were setting up, while others formed a firing line. She recognized the staging they were creating. Propaganda footage. This wasn't just execution, it was theater. Her finger rested beside the trigger guard, not on it. Not yet. The protocols were clear. She had no authority to initiate combat. 1 shooter against 52 was suicide by any tactical analysis. The correct move was to observe, report, and let the QRF handle intervention. But there was a difference between tactical analysis and reality. Claire had learned that difference in blood. Tactical analysis said wait for support. Reality said those men had minutes, not hours. Tactical analysis said preserve your own life. Reality said 6 lives outweighed 1. The mathematics of survival had never been as simple as the training manual suggested. But Claire had spent 3 years haunted by the faces of people she'd watched die while waiting for authorization. The pilot in Kandahar, she'd watched hostiles torture him for 16 minutes before her commander finally cleared her to engage. She'd saved him, but those 16 minutes played in her nightmares on an endless loop. She'd quit because she couldn't reconcile following orders with living with herself. Now she faced the same choice again. The hostile commander raised his arm, ready to give the order. The firing line raised their weapons. Claire's breathing steadied, her heart rate dropping into the calm zone she'd trained herself to reach. Not thinking anymore, just being. Sentinel, Specter, I'm engaging. Specter, negative. You are not authorized to. She switched off the radio. The first shot broke the night silence, 680 meters through falling snow, compensating for wind and cold air density. The hostile commander's arm was still raised when the round took him in the center mass. He crumpled, and the clearing erupted into chaos before his body hit the ground. Claire had already moved, relocating 15 meters to a secondary position before they could triangulate her location. The second shot took out the hostile nearest to the SEALs, the one holding a machete. Third shot, the camera operator, sending his equipment tumbling into the snow. Panic spread through the hostile force like wildfire. They couldn't see where the shots originated. The snow absorbed sound, making direction impossible to pinpoint. Some fired wildly into the forest. Others ran for vehicles. The disciplined formation dissolved into self-preservation. Claire moved again, finding a position with clear sight lines to the SEAL team. One of the guards was regaining composure, moving toward the captives with intent to execute them quickly. 712 meters. Different angle. She compensated for the increased range and fired. The guard dropped. The hostiles began returning fire toward her general position, but they were shooting at shadows. Claire had become what her callsign promised, a ghost in the snow. She continued engaging, each shot carefully selected to maximize confusion and minimize organized response, not attempting to eliminate all 52, just preventing them from coherent action. One hostile, clearly more experienced, organized a small team to flank her assumed position. Claire tracked them through thermals, let them commit to their movement, then engaged from a third location. The experienced one went down first, always take out leadership. The others broke and ran. But the hostile force had their own designated marksman, and he was better than the rest. Claire saw the muzzle flash a fraction of a second before impact. The round missed her head by inches, close enough that she felt the pressure wave. She immediately displaced, but he'd marked her position. Now, it became personal sniper versus sniper, the oldest duel in modern warfare. The enemy sniper was good. Claire caught the thermal signature of his position 800 meters out, elevated, excellent cover. He'd been patient, waiting for her to reveal herself fully before engaging. A professional. She moved through the snow, staying low, using terrain masking. He fired twice more, both rounds coming uncomfortably close. He was tracking her movement, predicting her displacement. That meant he'd studied counter-sniper tactics. This wouldn't be simple. Claire reached a depression in the terrain, a natural fighting position. She set up quickly, scanning for his signature. There, a slight thermal bloom as he adjusted position. But something was wrong. The signature was too obvious, too easy to spot. A decoy position. He was baiting her. She ran calculations in her head. Where would she position herself if she were him? Somewhere with sightlines to both the decoy and likely approach vectors. Somewhere that allowed observation of the SEAL team while maintaining overwatch. Her eyes tracked the terrain, ruling out impossible positions, narrowing possibilities. There, a cluster of rocks, 50 meters left of the thermal bloom, barely visible through the snow. The angle would give him everything he needed. Claire made her decision, trusting her instinct more than her instruments. The wind had shifted, now coming from the east at 9 knots. Temperature dropping. She adjusted her scope, compensating for the new variables. 840 meters to the rock cluster. Firing through falling snow. The shot required calculating not just ballistics but atmospheric refraction as temperature gradients bent light and trajectory. She took a breath, held it, let her heart rate slow. The world narrowed to the crosshairs and the mathematics of death. Wind speed, air density, Coriolis effect at this latitude. Everything collapsed into a single moment of absolute focus. The rifle bucked. 840 meters away, the enemy sniper's thermal signature flared once, then went still. No more shots came from his position. With their marksman down and their commander dead, the hostile forces' cohesion shattered completely. Vehicles started engines. Men ran into the forest. What had been an organized execution became a panicked retreat. Claire tracked the withdrawal, marking positions and directions for the incoming QRF, but held fire on the fleeing fighters. The SEAL team remained bound in the clearing, 3 guards still watching them but clearly uncertain whether to flee or hold position. Claire solved their dilemma with 3 quick shots, and suddenly the SEALs were alone in the snow. Claire reached the clearing 10 minutes later, having circled wide to approach from an unexpected angle. The SEALs were working to free themselves from their bonds, using a piece of broken metal one of them had found. They looked up as she emerged from the tree line, rifles tracking her until recognition set in. "Friendly," she called out, hands visible. "I'm the one who's been shooting at the people trying to kill you." The SEAL she recognized from his voice stared at her, blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. "Who are you?" "Communications operator from Sentinel Base," Claire said, moving to help with their restraints. She pulled a knife from her gear, cutting through the zip ties efficiently. "QRF is 20 minutes out. We need to move to a more defensible position in case they regroup." The SEAL team leader, a grizzled chief petty officer named Thompson, studied her with the assessment of someone who'd survived too many situations to take anything at face value. "A comms operator took out 50 hostiles by herself?" 12, Claire corrected. "I took out 12. The rest decided the fight wasn't worth it and left." She finished freeing the last SEAL, a young petty officer who looked barely old enough to enlist. "Can everyone move?" They could, though 3 were injured badly enough to need support. Claire directed them to a defensive position in the rocks, where she'd made some of her shots, giving them clear sight lines while offering cover. Then she switched her radio back on. "Sentinel, Specter, 6 friendly personnel secured. 3 wounded but ambulatory. Request medical evacuation." Morris's voice came through, tight with controlled anger and relief. "Copy that, Specter. QRF is 15 minutes from your position. Be advised, there will be significant discussion about your actions when you return." "Understood," Claire said calmly. "But sir, these men are alive. That's what matters." The SEAL she'd recognized earlier moved to sit beside her while they waited. 4 years ago, he said quietly, high-value target extraction near Kandahar. Someone provided overwatch from nearly 1,000 meters out. Shot maybe 6 times, saved all of our lives. We never saw who it was, but the mission report mentioned an angel. Claire kept her eyes on the tree line. "Wasn't an angel, just someone with a rifle and a responsibility." "Same person?" he asked. She didn't answer, but the silence was confirmation enough. He nodded slowly, understanding filling his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "Both times." The QRF arrived with medical support and enough firepower to level a small city. They secured the area, treated the wounded SEALs, and collected evidence from the hostile positions. Claire provided detailed intelligence reports while medics checked her for injuries she hadn't noticed. By the time they returned to Sentinel Base, dawn was breaking on Christmas morning. The snow had stopped, leaving everything covered in pristine white that sparkled in the early light. It would have been beautiful if Claire hadn't been expecting the consequences waiting for her. Morris met her in the operations center, his expression unreadable. "Captain Hartman, I need to inform you that your actions tonight violated direct orders and exceeded your authority as a communications operator. There will be a formal inquiry." "Understood, sir," Claire said. She'd known this was coming. Part of her welcomed it. At least this time, the people she'd saved were alive to see the aftermath. Morris's expression softened slightly. "That said, I've already received calls from JSOC Command. They're very interested in speaking with you." The SEAL team's commander submitted a preliminary report describing your actions as the finest display of precision engagement he's witnessed in 20 years of service. The recognition felt hollow to Claire. Commendations and praise had never been what motivated her. She'd accumulated medals over 5 years, each one representing moments she wished had never needed to happen. The Silver Star came from saving an infantry platoon pinned down by enemy fire. She remembered their faces, grateful and alive. She also remembered the 12 hostile fighters who died that day, each one somebody's son or brother or father. Claire shook her head. I'm not going back to active operations. I told you why I left. They're not offering you a combat role, Morris said. They want you to train the next generation. Teach others what you know, help them develop the judgment to use it properly. You proved tonight that you haven't lost your skills. But you also proved something else. You know when rules should be broken and when they shouldn't. That caught her off guard. I disobeyed orders. You made a tactical assessment that 6 American lives outweighed procedural compliance, Morris corrected. And you executed that assessment with minimal force necessary to achieve the objective. That's not just skill, Captain. That's wisdom. The kind we desperately need to pass on. Claire looked out the window at the snow-covered base, thinking about the SEALs being loaded onto medical transport, thinking about the enemy sniper she'd killed and all the others over the years, thinking about whether there was a way to use what she'd learned without continuing to add to the count. I'll consider it, she finally said. 3 days later, Claire sat in the same communication center where everything had started. The chair felt familiar, comfortable. The radio equipment hummed its steady rhythm. Nothing had changed. Yet everything was different. The physical space remained identical, same gray walls, same harsh fluorescent lighting, same coffee maker that produced liquid barely qualifying as caffeine delivery system. But the psychological landscape had shifted fundamentally. She couldn't unknow what she'd relearned, that her skills hadn't diminished, that she could still make the impossible shots, that the weight of those decisions still settled exactly where it always had, somewhere between her heart and her conscience. Word had spread through the base. People looked at her differently now, with respect and curiosity mixed with something like awe. She hated it. The legend of Specter had caught up with her again, refusing to let her be anonymous. Rodriguez found her during her shift, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Heard you might be leaving, he said, offering her one. Considering it, Claire admitted. JSOC wants me at their training center, teaching precision, engagement, and tactical decision-making. You should do it, Rodriguez said. What you did, Christmas Eve, that wasn't just about shooting. It was about reading the situation, understanding what mattered, making the call when no one else would. That's what needs to be taught. He was young enough that the idealism still showed through, old enough to have seen enough combat to know the difference between theory and practice. Claire recognized the type: smart, observant, capable of learning from others' experience rather than requiring his own scars first. The military needed more people like him, fewer people who led through trauma and survival. Claire sipped the coffee, considering, I left because I was tired of killing people. Training others to be better at it doesn't exactly solve that problem. Maybe, Rodriguez said, or maybe you'd be training them to make the choices you made: when to fight, when to hold back, how to live with the responsibility. The military has plenty of people who can teach marksmanship. It needs people who can teach judgment. He had a point. Claire had spent 3 years trying to escape her past by hiding from it. Maybe the path forward was through it, instead using what she'd learned, both the skills and the scars, to help others avoid her mistakes while learning from her successes. The radio crackled with routine traffic, base traffic control, coordinating a supply flight, weather updates, nothing urgent, normal operations continuing as they always did, indifferent to the dramas that occasionally erupted within them. Claire thought about the SEAL team, now safely back with their families, about the enemy sniper who wouldn't be going home to his, about the weight of both outcomes and what they meant. Every choice carried consequence. The question wasn't whether to bear that weight, but how to carry it forward. I'll call them, she said finally. JSOC. I'll hear what they're offering. Rodriguez smiled. Good. The next generation of operators deserves someone who understands that the hardest shot isn't about hitting the target. It's about deciding whether to take it at all, and living with that choice afterward. He left her alone with her thoughts and her coffee. Outside, the winter sun sparkled on snow that had already begun to melt. Change was coming, whether she was ready for it or not. The ghost that was Specter couldn't stay hidden forever. Maybe it was time to stop trying. Claire pulled up the contact information JSOC had sent. Her finger hovered over the dial button, hesitating one last time. Then she thought about Christmas Eve, about the moment she'd switched off her radio and made her choice, about how that moment had defined who she was more than any title or call sign ever could. She pressed the button. The line rang once, twice. A professional voice answered, and Claire began the conversation that would define her next chapter. Not as a ghost or a legend, but as something she'd never been before: a teacher, a mentor, someone who could help others find their way through the impossible choices that war demanded. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. Colonel Sarah Brennan, Director of Advanced Tactical Training for JSOC, outlined a comprehensive program that sounded nothing like Claire had expected. Not a return to operational deployment, not teaching basic marksmanship. Instead, an intensive course designed for senior operators who already possessed technical skills but needed help developing the judgment to use them effectively. Classes on decision-making under uncertainty. Seminars on recognizing when protocols should be followed and when they should be questioned. Training that acknowledged the psychological weight of precision engagement. "We have instructors who can teach people to shoot," Brennan had explained. "We need someone who can teach them to think. Someone who understands that the hardest part of this job isn't hitting the target, it's living with the decision after." Claire considered the offer carefully, asking detailed questions about curriculum, authority, and support structure. She wanted assurance this wasn't just another way to turn her into a weapon. Brennan provided concrete answers, shared philosophical frameworks that aligned with Claire's own hard-earned wisdom. By the end, Claire found herself agreeing to visit the training center for a trial period, no commitment beyond seeing whether the reality matched the promise. Specter wasn't retiring. Specter was evolving. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the world needed. As dawn broke over Sentinel Base, painting the snow gold and pink, Claire allowed herself a small smile. The legend had returned not to haunt her, but to help her forge something new and meaningful, a legacy built not on confirmed kills, but on lives saved through wisdom shared. It felt like coming home to a place she'd never been before.